I think the world at large has differed. I think simply because of one thing is because of the two ways that you can use your breath. And the most easy is understanding that every time you inhale, your body goes into what's called these three governing principles that can be applied to everything across the board. How you live, how you sleep, how you interact, your wellness, relationships, mindset, all of it. I realized that these three principles were just everywhere, between every single line. I know that in the littlest way possible, in whichever way possible, I need to bring back this wisdom to my ecosystem.
My guest today is Nidhi Pandya, an Ayurvedic doctor who has built a huge following over the last few years. She has also just released her book, Your Body Already Knows Intuitive Ayurveda. In this episode, Nidhi shares with us her Vedic upbringing, some of the key principles in Ayurveda, and many practical tips you can implement into your daily practice as well. The reason I started this podcast was to give you a trusted place to hear about the latest innovations, ideas, and concepts that are helping you live a healthier and more prosperous tomorrow. Every Tuesday at 8 a.m. in the UK, 3 a.m. EST, we're going to be dropping a new episode. So if you want to be the first to be notified of episodes with Christian Angermeyer, Aaron D'Souza, the founder of Enhanced Games, Nidhi Pandya, and Peter Diamandis, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. Now, I hope you enjoy the episode. Let's dive in. Nidhi, there are many listeners that tune into this podcast that are very aware of health and longevity. So for those that don't know anything about Ayurveda, what does Ayurveda mean? And why should they learn more about it?
Great question. So Ayurveda literally translates to the science of life. It is a holistic health and healing system that comes from ancient India. It's also often known as the sister science of yoga because they both come from the larger Vedic tradition, and they're both 5,000 years old. But being the science of life, Ayurveda covers everything from prevention and treatment of disease to longevity, to fertility, childcare, nutrition, lifestyle, social conduct. You name it. If it has to do with human life, Ayurveda will have something to say about it. What I also tell people, and I love this, is that Ayurveda was one of the first systems to introduce the idea of bio-individuality. And a lot of current modern day trends like turmeric, ashwagandha, oil pulling, dry scrubbing, bullet coffee, they're all from Ayurveda.
Wow, bio-individuality. I definitely want to dive straight into that. But just one question beforehand. Your childhood was all about Vedic, Ayurvedic traditions, right? When you compare your childhood in India to one of that you might see in New York today, how did it differ?
So I think the world at large has differed. I think simply because of one thing is because of us living isolated lives. We're not living in communities anymore. I grew up in a large joint family of 14 people, but also because the world has become flat now. The access to information is so tremendous that we're completely disconnected from our wisdom. I think growing up before, so it's India and it's New York, but it's also the times. Even if I were to go back to Mumbai today and I would see the state of affairs there, I think we're just doing a lot of front brain learning, focus-based informational learning, and not all-based, connection-based inferential learning, which is all back-brained and more integrated brain or whole brain activity. And I think those are the two things that are setting us apart from our ancestors more than anything else, and the world being flat. So if I have to point three things, I'm actually raising two daughters in New York myself. And I will say I'm a single mother and I'm raising these two girls. And I will say that I can pass on some of the Ayurvedic wisdom, which was passed on to me very like a first language. There were never disclaimers. There were never such things as, according to Ayurveda. I mean, we just learned about the rhythms of life, the science of life, in the most immersive manner. And while I live in New York, and I'm a divorced woman, so I don't even live in a community or with a larger family. I'm still able to pass those ideas down to my children subconsciously without me realizing that I'm doing that. But I think it's the world at large it's drastically changed. And I think that is where our issues arise from.
It's not just Ayurvedic traditions, right? It's something as my ancestors or my parents are Lebanese as well. And you really see that differentiator with a more isolated, more digital world. Can you just hone in on maybe 1, 2, 3 examples of traditions that you remember acutely as you were growing up?
Absolutely. So, I mean, traditions I remember a lot, but I'd like to actually break this into 2 parts. I'd like to talk about how I learned Ayurveda, which is like how does an upbringing in an Ayurvedic household look different? So, for example, Julian, when I would go down to play with my friends as a young girl, instead of saying, "Hey, come by 7 p.m.," my mom would say, "Come when you see the bats weaving through the sky." And that does not, by the way, feel like an instruction. It never did. I was a rebel, but that just felt so natural. It just felt like it's my time to start dwindling because there is some other life that takes over in this during this nocturnal time, the nocturnal species that come out. And here, right there, in that one statement, there are multiple connections because over the year, you realize that if it's winter, you're coming home at 6 p.m. If it's summer, you're staying out till night, 7:30. So it sounds like a very simple command, but it really connects you deeply to the patterns of the universe. Or I would say even a statement such as, "Hey, we don't eat yogurt at night because yogurt is heavy to digest." Now, just in that one statement, I've made so many connections. I've understood that yogurt can be heavy and slimy, and night is not the best time for digestion. And also maybe lunch is the best time for digestion because that's when yogurt is offered to me. So there's so many. So your mind as a young girl is just always making connections. So these are not really traditions. But if I had to think of traditions, what I remember the most, Julian, is we were five girls in the house, right? 5 cousins. I had a real sister and a few other children. We all were treated like one family. And we would sleep on the family bed. And my grandfather, who was the saint, Ayurvedic healer and saint, he would sleep in that same room on his bed. But what I remember and what I realize every day has had the most profound effect on me, he would wake up at 4:30 in the morning. And he would wake up and he would do his rituals. He would do his oil pulling. He would wash his own clothes. We had plenty of stuff in India. We were a large family. We had enough stuff, but he would wash his own clothes. He would boil gold in water and make his water that he would drink throughout the day. I would see him massaging his body. So we ate for the seasons. We lived for the time of the day. We connected, and during the certain seasons we made certain foods, and the young kids or the family were always employed to help out. Even Ayurvedic herbs, when my grandfather had to make herbs, we would actually all get involved, for the drying of the herbs, and we would chant before we would actually start making those herbs. We would set intentions. And all of this was learned in such an immersive manner that it just becomes second nature. And I couldn't be more grateful for having this beautiful childhood.
When you think about Bio-Individuality, did you see you were treated slightly different to your sisters? Was there an individual routine per person?
That's a beautiful question. And I also think that sometimes people take Bio-Individuality too far. So I'll tell you, on a daily basis, we ate the same. 14 members of the family ate the same way, lived the same way. However, because we knew our tendencies, or because we understood our tendencies, or we were just subconsciously learned. So my grandfather, for example, would say things like, "Oh, you guys are all going on in the sun for a picnic." He would tell one particular cousin of mine, for example, "Hey, Ruchi, you be a little extra careful. Make sure you're drinking extra coconut water because your body can, heat up quickly." Or like, "Oh, Nidhi, you'll have a tendency to do, this because your body can go dry quickly." So we just understood about our bodies through these statements, but specific particular care was taken only when things were possible, when it was possible for things to get aggravated. But and a lot of people misunderstand that, most of us can live very in the same, pretty much similarly because we are diurnal mammals. We work with the sun with slight tweaks. And we were made aware of those little slight tweaks so early on that it just felt like ease. It never felt like a burden. In fact, Julian, I always say that when I was growing up, in spite of this super health conscious family, health always felt like the freedom that comes from being well. and not the fear of disease, which is the opposite of what I see. People want to be healthy because they're scared of sickness. But for us, it was like, I can do so much now because I know about my body. I can and that's like my family's joke as well, that, hey, Nidhi, we know why you do this, so that you can just really go out there, travel, do whatever you want to do because you know how to balance it off, and those were the little tips that were passed on to us regularly. And and maybe still some, like my older sister, she had a specific routine because she was really, depleted. So she would eat certain foods and she needed massage, but she needed that special care and attention for a certain part of in her life. That's how we grew up. And it was just incredible to see different people respond differently to the same stimulus. And that by itself, as a young child, it does so much to your brain.
I'm hearing intuition, like being connected, and we're going to get onto your book very soon. But did you see your intuition of your body and your mind drop when you moved to New York? And you moved to New York in your late teens, was it?
Yeah, I would say when I was 20.
Yeah.
So I will say, right, I just want to go back to this point of intuition. I just want people, this is what I have learned, is that intuition and wisdom are very close to each other. And a lot of times we look down upon the idea of intuition because we're like, oh, I mean, that's so woo-woo, it's so vague. But when we talk about wisdom and we realize that, again, my running joke is that deer does not wake up in the morning complaining, oh my God, I have to wake up again early tomorrow and eat grass, really. Deer doesn't do that. Tigers don't get carried away with the new study that says waking up at 5 a.m. is, this brainwave frequency patterns. Tigers know when they have to. When we are born, we know to drink from our mother's breast, never having used our mouth when we're in the womb. And that by itself is this deep connection to our wisdom. We know what we're supposed to. Animals know what soil to roll in when they're sick, what to eat when they're nursing. Bears eat big cabbage heads right before they hibernate because they need to have that bowel movement once they're out of that hibernation phase. I mean, that is wisdom. You can call it intuition, and yes, it is, but it's just that knowing. So coming to New York, and I will say when I came to New York, for a short time, I actually worked for a pharmaceutical company. And it was a very different life here, right? Because I was like, oh, that's a marketing job is easy to get. You're still figuring, in your 20s, you're like, hey, I know I like that, but there's no room for this. And that for that 1 year when I worked for the pharmaceutical company, I have never felt more disconnected. And I'm not saying pharma has its great place, but what I saw there, and I saw the disconnection from what I knew all along. Oh, by the end of that year, I was like, I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And it didn't matter back then if nobody else knew or understood what Ayurveda was. But I was like, I know that in the littlest way possible, in whichever way possible, I need to bring back this wisdom to my ecosystem.
Fast forward to today. Your body already knows. Intuitive Ayurveda, intuition now. 21 days to reset your gut, sleep, mood, and health. Why did you write this book?
So I'll be honest with you, Julian, the plan to write a book has been present for the last, I would say, 15 years. And it was very close to my heart. As you know, you and I were talking earlier, I've been impressed and inspired by Gibran my whole life. So I think the closest to my heart is being a writer, and expressing my truth. And the book had to be something that felt really right. So there was a lot of different proposals to write a book on fertility, to write a book on the neuroscience behind something, and all of this. But I had to write a book. And honestly, all of those books would make me sound very intelligent. But they would not allow me to help my audiences reconnect with their wisdom. I wrote this book because I wanted everyone to know that you don't have to connect with anybody else's intelligence or expertise out there. All you need to do to live well is to reconnect with your wisdom. And if I had to write my first book, it had to be this. And now I can write anything else, but I'm like, I want to set this foundation, this clear that you know what you need to live well.
How do you reset your wisdom? How do you connect with that?
So, there are ideas in the book that I talk about. I talk about these three principles, the three governing principles. And I must go a little bit to the backstory, Julian, if you don't mind. But basically what happened is I after my formal education in Ayurveda, when I started practicing, I mean, you come out of college and started practicing. I started practicing conventionally and academically how the world practices Ayurveda today, which is you come to me, I'll give you what to eat, how to live, and I'll give you a bunch of herbs and I'll tell you about your body and I'll feel so smart. And then you might feel better temporarily. And then after some point, you're like, this is not sustainable. And it sets people off into a cycle of dependency and despair a little bit because they have to keep coming back to you to understand how to live. And then something fundamentally felt wrong about it. I mean, I had a very successful career. There were days where I saw like 15, 20 patients in a day. And I was like, but this just didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I was setting people free. This is not why I had started out. And so I said that, look, this is the science of life and there has to be a way. You know what the first cause of disease, Julian, is in Ayurveda is? The first cause of disease in Ayurveda is called pradnya apradha, the loss of wisdom. And I'm like, if that is the first cause of disease, of course we're going to be in disease, right? And then I actually shut shop. I shut my books for some time. And I said, I need to make that connection, what it is that's going to take us to that deep wisdom. And then I went back to this principle of the Vedic sciences, right? The principle says, yatha brahmande tatha pinde, yatha pinde tatha brahmande. As is the macro, such is the micro. As above, so below, and vice versa. So I said, this is the science of life, and all I have to do is understand this connection between the outside and the inside. So I shut my books. And I was like, I want to be Newton under that tree. I knew Newton didn't discover gravity in his laboratory, right? He was under the tree. And Archimedes was in his bathtub when he made that connection between, whether objects sinks and floats. So that's what happened to me, I would say. I realized these three governing principles that can be applied to everything across the board. How you live, how you sleep, how you interact, your wellness, relationships, mindset, all of it. And I was like, what? Like, this makes sense. And it was rooted in Ayurvedic science. And when I looked back into my textbooks, when I reopened my books, I realized that these three principles were just everywhere, between every single line, just not articulated in this exact manner. And then I started looking at other blue zones. I started looking at other traditions, whether it's, Middle East tradition, whether it's traditional Chinese medicine and traditional Asian, traditional Asian cultures. And I said everybody fundamentally understood these three. Indigenous wisdom had it. And so the book outlines these three principles. And then I can tell you how we can use those three principles to keep coming back to our wisdom. They become that filter. Anything that cannot be filtered through this goes out of the box. And then I run a program, Julian, where I teach women, right? So while I was writing the book, I was running a program. And I worked with over 150 women in that period where I took them through this. And some of them are doctors, some of them are Ayurvedic doctors, some of them are Ayurvedic students for many years. And the one thing that they said is they just had like this major awakening of understanding something that was academic before, or they found their North Star. Like, these are some of the words. In fact, the word your body already knows was given by one of my clients. She's an Iranian woman. For the last 30 years, she's like, I've read every single book out there, and she's taken plenty of courses and pranayama and yoga training. And she says, this did it for me, where I felt like my teacher has come and given me, like, this is all I have, take it. And so it's these three principles there. I cannot say they're mine. They're the governing principles. I've stumbled upon them in this particular manner. And that's why I can become a vessel to offer it to others.
Can you break down those three principles for us?
Right. So the first principle, and without going into too much detail, but still giving you a sense of what that is, right? So the first principle is this, that why does life exist, Julian, on our planet and no other planet?
Because there is an abundance of oxygen, and that has spawned microorganisms and so on and so forth.
And those microorganisms can exist because of, yes, the oxygen, the sunlight, the water. If I have to put it in one word, the climate is right. In this entire Milky Way, as we know it so far, we cannot see life anywhere else. Where the climate is wrong, there's no water, there's no oxygen. Every single planet has something a little off, right? But the climate is right. And over the last 4.5 billion years, from single cell organisms, we didn't have any laboratories, we did not have any scientists, we didn't even have these human brains, which are only 300,000 years old. But for the last 4.5 billion years from single cell organisms, we've become these full-blown intellectual mammals because the climate was right, no effort required. Now the climate is wrong, and we're actually questioning life on our planet. So the one thing that's evident and clear, that when the climate is right, life will thrive, and you don't need to do anything. Things will reset. What needs to be flushed out will be flushed out. What needs to evolve will evolve, but it'll continue to thrive if the climate is right. The first principle is the idea that our body is a universe to trillions of microorganisms that live in our body, right? Microbiome, today they're linking it to just about everything from your nervous system to your sleep, to your gut health, to your hormones, to you name it, right? They're like, oh, if your microbiome is good, your immune system is great, and you have to worry about disease. Anyways, so there's a climate, right? You can't grow tomatoes in Alaska. Everything requires a certain climate. At least in the winter, you can't grow them. So what is the climate where our body thrives, right? And once we talk about it, Julian, you realize even Middle Eastern traditions, every tradition somewhere knew this. So you and I are going to do this together. And anybody who's listening, I'd like you to do the same thing. Just you take your palm and you cup it in a way that if you can kind of create a little bit of suction and exhale into it. Okay. What does that feel like? Was that hot, cold, warm?
I'm feeling warm.
Yeah. Was it dry, moist? What was it?
Moist.
Moist. Okay. So warm and moist. You said those words. I didn't. Okay. What is our blood?
Our blood, as in, what's it do?
Warm and moist. We are warm blood.
Sure.
We are warm-blooded. So warm and moist. Our reproductive fluids. I mean, comedians in the U.S. joke about it all the time, right? Like pun intended. Oh, warm and moist. Our urine is warm and moist. The mother's milk is warm and moist. Where does life grow outside? If it's as above, so below. Life grows in places and those equatorial belts where the climate is warm and moist. Not hot and humid. Then it's tropical Amazon rainforest. There's inflammation and there's like bacteria and all of that, right? Warm and moist is where life grows. It's that, what kind of people do we like, Julian? Warm people. Nobody likes somebody who's hot-tempered, who's cold, right? Anger is a hot emotion. Depression is a sluggish, like slimy emotion. Withdrawal is a slimy emotion. Stress and anxiety are too dry. Stress is hot and dry. Anxiety is just overly dry. And you feel this if you're anxious for a few days, you'll actually not only feel dry in your head, you'll actually feel dry in your throat and eyes and all of that, right? But love, gratitude, compassion are so warm and moist. All our healthy comfort foods are warm and moist. It's where the sun comes and heats up and dries up the planet, and the moon comes and replenishes the moisture and cools, and the perfect balance is warm and moist. So the whole idea, how flora and fauna, do you know probiotics, microbiome was earlier known as flora and fauna, like when they first discovered this marvelous thing. Flora and fauna grows in places, like out here in the US, it's Florida and marsh. It's warm and moist. And any deviation from that, right? Global warming outside, inflammation inside. Pretty much the same thing. Toxicity on the planet leads to global warming. Toxicity in the body leads to inflammation. So the idea is that we need to come back to this climate. Most of us have deviated. Other people are too hot in their bodies, hot and dry, burnt out, inflamed, or people are too cold and dry, like depleted, just anxious, scatterbrained. And these become kind of the bio-individualities as well. Or they're people who are just overnourished, sluggish, just become like marsh, like thick marsh. Nothing can grow there. So our job is to come back to warm and moist. And if you look at all traditional diets, they did this really, really well. Most of us firstly eat cooked foods. And I'll tell you, when we didn't eat cooked foods, what we did. And I'm just going to start with nutrition because it's the easiest place to start. So with nutrition, right, we get cooked foods. The process of cooking releases moisture and warms up the food, warm and moist. But also there are certain traditions like yours and mine. We use spices and good fats. The good fats is the moisture. The spices are the warmth. There are other cultures, even if you did raw foods, you always paired the raw foods with oil and vinegar. Oil is the moist, and the vinegar has that hot, warm aspect. So even raw foods were never consumed with either lemon juice and oil or lemon juice. They always, and then some spices and sumac and cumin and whatever it is that you want to put in. Or there are cultures that eat fermented foods. The process of fermentation by itself is a warm and moist process. It is a multiplication of bacteria. In fact, you put it in a warm place so it can ferment. And it's aerobic. You'll always see little water droplets when you're fermenting something. So, life thrives in warm and moist. And all of Ayurvedic recipes always start with warming up a good fat, ghee, or any other good fat, and putting in those spices. You started at that place. And I've double checked it. I've looked at every possible culture that survived and thrived. And this is what we did. But even in our minds, right? When you're triggered, right, Julian, when I'm triggered, I'm too hot and dry. So this is one of the things that works really well for my clients, is to identify when they're losing their warm and moist inside. Like, how do you show up with that warm and moist? When you're in warm and moist and you're in flow and you're in present moment and you've lost sense of time and space, it's all that same place. When your inhales and exhales are balanced, because your inhale is what I call solar and your exhale is parasympathetic, it's more lunar. And when they're equal and you're feeling in that state, you're already connected to your wisdom. The decisions you make in that point are the decisions that you connect to the intuition. But I'm riled up. That's not your intuition because you're hot and dry. So it could be a past trauma that's coming up. It could be a trigger. It could be conditioning. But if your body is not in equilibrium, you're not speaking to your intuition. You're not speaking to your wisdom. You're speaking to an imbalanced state within. But why this becomes easy, Julian, is because people can start having this somatic, palpable experience that, okay, this feels so loving and warm and moist in my... And then we work with toolkits where I give people toolkits that how do you come back to feeling like this? But we can bring this state warm and moist in how we interact in our relationships. So that's the first principle. I know that took the longest time, so I won't take so much time for the next two.
Can I just jump in before we go on to the next two?
Yes,
Could you just
please.
Maybe just guide us with some tools that someone could use to stay warm and moist?
Okay, so I'm saying this is how you want to start, right? You want to start thinking more about cooked foods than anything else. And if you are doing raw foods, do not consider that you're going to have a raw salad without any dressing that's going to actually work out for you. Think about how your ancestors ate it, and you'll see they always brought in the warm and moist. And a small amount of fermented foods, they can be overly heating. They could make your gut into a tropical, landscape. But small amount of fermented foods like olives and sauerkraut and kimchi and pickles and whatever you want to include, they're great to include. And spices as well, because spices, good fats, all great ways to bring in warm and moist in your diet. But you can also bring it in. One of Ayurveda's gifts to the world is applying oil on your body. Actually, oil anywhere you can, in your orifices, in your nose, in your eyes, in your ears, in your mouth, and every single hole that really exits from your body. And you know that, Julian, as you're studying Ayurveda recently. But let's just start by massaging your body with oil before you go into the shower. And what this oil does, right? Oil is warm and moist to begin with. And this experience of massaging that oil brings this warmth and moisture into your system. But what is remarkable now is that now science knows that the microbiome that lives on our skin is lipophilic, which means they need oils. Like they would eat our own sebum, like our own oils, to actually survive. So you're nourishing your microbiome as well. And not only that, I mean, the benefits go far and beyond, but let's just talk about the skin being a channel of consumption. And you don't have to eat all the fats through your mouth all the time. You can just put that oil in your body. And not only that, so it'll replenish the microbiome. So for me, I don't use sanitizer. I don't wash my hands 25 times a day. I don't get sick for years, and I travel a ton. And I can vouch the same for my family, my children, the clients that I work with. But we have oil on our bodies, and your microbiome, we're helping ourselves. We all know, right? You over-sanitize, you see what happens to your hands. They feel dry, and fundamentally that does not feel right. Nobody feels nice with dry skin or sticky skin. You want that perfect warm and moist. So you apply the oil before you shower. This is a caveat. Ideally, before you even exercise, and then you can wipe down excesses if you like. But if you apply oil and you go and exercise for a little bit and your pores open up, that oil penetrates inside. Oil has this very specific ability to pull grime out of your system and nourish. It's the only substance that can detoxify and nourish both at the same time.
Which oil are you talking about? Like, what would you recommend?
So traditionally, it's sesame oil or it's other other Ayurvedic herbal oils like Dhanvantari or Mahanarayan or Bala, Bala. But I tell people just start where you can. Just get any body oil which does not have any adulteration. Not coconut, because coconut has thick lipids, but any other body oil. Like I tell people to go here in the US to Trader Joe's and get the lemongrass coconut. It just says coconut, but it's actually an almond oil. But the lemongrass coconut almond oil, to just get that and start there. So you start with any body oil as long as there are no other additives. But and if not, do sesame. Sesame is great. It's ideal for most people. Most people, unless you have some skin eruptions, then you want to work with a doctor or practitioner if you have a skin condition. But otherwise, that is a great. So start there. So I talked about food. I talked about this. And then, when we go to this, I talked about oiling. And of course, I can go on talking about this, but I'm sure more will come up as we go into the second two principles. So the second principle, which is again huge, is now science talks about the circadian rhythms, and Ayurvedic knowledge systems, and I'm sure that traditional knowledge systems identified 6 phases in the day. There's 6 distinct phases that allow for different neurotransmitters to have their peaks in our body. What does this mean? What this means is that depending on what phase you are in that day, like little seasons, your body has some special abilities to either metabolize a certain way or have, a certain activity. So you're kind of flowing with the tide. I'm just going to break this down in a couple of minutes and say that, okay, as above, so below. If what happens outside is what happens inside. And I'm a diurnal mammal, which means I rise with the sun and sleep with the sun. I don't have nocturnal vision, and electricity is fairly recent, 1920s, 30s. What happens in the morning hours between 6 and 10? So between 6 and 10, it's wet and soggy outside. It is also wet. If you walk on grass, it's dewy. And that's how the body is. The sun is barely coming up. And in the body, people experience nasal congestion, eye boogers, sometimes thick padded joints you cannot really show off in a yoga class at 6:30 a.m. because your body also has that kind of, condensed fluids as they're outside. It's a time to kickstart warming up. Just as sun is coming up, you want to exercise. You want to have a light, warm breakfast. Yes, breakfast is not the largest meal of the day because your digestive enzymes are super low. The heat in your body is super low. So you have a small breakfast. Between 10 and 2, as the sun peaks, your focus peaks, collaborative frontal brain focus peaks, and your digestion peaks. Plants cannot dare to photosynthesize without the sun. So, we humans just think we're very cool. But best time to eat your largest meal is between the hours of 10 and 2. Your insulin sensitivity is the highest. Your cortisol is gone low. Your ghrelin, hunger hormone, is in its right place, but you won't overeat. And your gastric juices, your gastrin, and all the other enzymes are doing really well. So best time to eat is between 10 and 2. What happens between 2 and 6 in the evening, you'll see many people at their desks wanting to stretch. Everybody yawns. And it's not really. Nobody will go and sleep for the night at 4 p.m. But people have that windy experience because outside on the planet, there is wind outside as the sun begins to set. Same thing happens in our body. As the heat lowers down, as what we call the excitatory mediators go down, that experience of wind is enhanced. Great reminder to just slow down. It's your body's natural cue that it needs a little bit of love. And if you still have work to do, reserve your lightest work for that time. And perhaps get a tulsi tea, a peppermint tea, do a little bit of deep breathing, breath work, move around, go for a slight walk, but honor the fact that the body wants to actually start unwinding. And after 6 p.m., our ancestors didn't really eat dinner. They ate soup, they ate supper, they had bone broths and stews and good fats and all of that. Because when the sun goes down, we don't really have that metabolic ability. And electricity, like I said, electricity and chronic disease have really had their rise together. And then, 10 o'clock be in bed, because between 10 and 2, magic happens. I can write a whole book on what happens between 10 and 2, because that is when your nervous system repairs, your metabolism repairs, your body builds new tissue, there's cell regeneration that occurs. So those are a few cycles of the day. So you want to live. So when I talk about the foods to eat, you want to eat a heavy lunch, you want to eat a light dinner, you want to exercise in the morning as much as you can. If you can't, there are always ways around it. But you want to keep that heavy lunch and light dinner is the most important thing, if there's one thing you will take out of this. And just mindfully bump up your sleeping time for it to be a little bit earlier. So if you're sleeping at 1, start sleeping at 12:30. You're sleeping at 12:30, start sleeping at 12. Sleeping at 12, just the 30 minutes. Just give yourself 30 minutes and work your way to as close to 10 as possible eventually.
And do we have a third principle as well?
Yeah, and that's the briefest principle to explain, because it's the deepest and it's the most profound. So that's a whole, I don't go into too much detail, but the idea is that no matter what you do, no matter how warm and moist you stay, no matter how much you follow the circadian rhythms, firstly, what makes us human and what keeps life is patterns and rhythms. But one of the biggest rhythms is growth, transformation, and decline. That these are three cycles that you'll see everywhere. A fruit grows, then it ripens, that's its transformation. And if you don't eat it, it's going to decay. There's a spring, then there is summer, and then there is autumn and winter. There's spring, which is a growth phase, and there is summer, which is the transformation phase, and there's fruits and flowers, and then there is the decay of the autumn and the winter. And these are inevitable cycles. But what's beautiful is that even as human beings, we have the growth from 0 to adolescence. From adolescence to all the way for our entire youth till we age. It's our transformation period. It's when we do the most in the world, when we procreate, we are most creative. And then depending on how and when that starts slowing down, there's a decline. And on the other side of the reproductive phase of a cell, of a fruit, of anything else, there is gradual decay. And you want to embrace it, you want to honor it. And we can, of course, talk about longevity if you want later. But you want to honor it. And you want to know that just as you would not want cells that are, on the other side of their function in your body, and eventually you want them to they'll naturally atrophy, they'll be flushed out. That's what the planet does with us. So I say reverence for death as a result of aging gracefully is reverence for new life. And we create space for the new. And we see this in relationships where there's growth, transformation. But if there's no more growth, those are intangible places. You can continue to have growth and transformation. But if you stop, you'll go into decline, So the only place where this principle does not hold true is spiritual journey. It's a journey within. There's growth, there's transformation, there's endless transformation, and then there's dissolution. There is no decline. So I just find this very beautiful, this principle, that to realize the transience of life and the opportunities where this does not hold true, this principle.
Such a good segue into Ayurveda and its place in Western society right now. Like, how would someone, let's say, I always use an anecdote or an individual in San Diego, John from San Diego. How does John from San Diego implement his fitness routine and his supplementation with an Ayurvedic lifestyle? Can they live side by side?
And I live in New York raising 2 teenage daughters, so you absolutely can. So I would say John wants to first start thinking about this heavy lunch and light dinner. The biggest one, I'd say, right? Chronic disease and electricity just like rose together. So the biggest one is John wants to start thinking about them. Easy enough. Then John wants to start thinking about eating cooked foods as much as possible. He wants to go and look back into the history of mankind and say how we became this species after we started cooking our food and our microbiome changed. So then John wants to start eating cooked foods as much as he can. When he's been able to do that, then John wants to say, let me eat as much fresh as I can, right? When he's done that, he wants to say, what can I cook and use spices and good fats? So he wants to realize, oh my God, today they're saying that these spices are anti-inflammatory and some of them are antioxidants and they neutralize free radicals, which can create cancer and other conditions. But I can just put them in my food. I don't need to have them in these supplements. So I'm going to start cooking with these spices. And so now he's had this journey. Then he can say, hey, now, to my morning ritual, I want to start oiling my body because it's going to protect my joints. It's going to create lymphatic drainage. It's going to calm my nervous system right in the morning. So I'm going to use oil 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. It's up to you. But he wants to start oiling his body in the morning before he goes to work out. And it'll make him sweat more, better detox. What a lovely practice. So then John wants to start doing that. And then John can go on to doing other things. But I would say that if John doesn't even go beyond this, and he just eats fresh, cooked, uses his spices, exercises in the morning, oils his body, probably oils his hair, and creates maybe eventually a nightly ritual, right? Whether he's massaging the bottom of his feet, drinking a warm cup of milk because he's had his dinner, supper at 6 o'clock, and maybe adding some turmeric to it because everybody talks about it. And maybe these Ayurvedic people, they put it in their milk and something comes out of it, but I'm not going to put it in a capsule. I'm going to put it in my milk at night. And and he goes down on his refined and junk, I would say he's fought 80% of the battles. And it's beautiful, Julian, because I'm working with centenarians in India. We're doing research that who are these people who lived for 100 years and they have no medical intervention really. And what we realized when we did their blood work is that most of them had no chronic conditions, no high blood pressure, no high cholesterol, no diabetes, like it's crazy. 90% plus had zero chronic conditions and they're living so well. What we realize is that most of them are in the lower socioeconomic strata of the society, that they don't have electricity, they preserve electricity, they don't have refrigeration. So they're just living in this order, they're living in this way. And I think eventually John would be more inclined to not consume so much news and so much media. Maybe what I find the biggest tool actually for anybody in the West or anybody in the world, I would say, breath is my biggest tool. And there's so many different ways to do breath, so much you can do to change the inner climate of your body just by using your breath. You can have drastically different biochemistry just by using your breath. And all of this is very doable, right, Julian? I mean, it's not far-fetched to do all of these things.
Breath, I would love to go a bit deeper into that because it feels like every part of the wellness health space is getting monetized and packaged and sold and put into a pill form, whilst actually Ayurveda is something that anyone can really do, and it's probably cheaper than just living a normal life. So the first question relates to that is, are there any clear misconceptions that you see in the health space right now that you think avoid at all costs?
Julian, I have to firstly say this is one of my I've been doing a few podcasts every day. This has been one of my favorites. You ask such useful, relevant questions. Oh my goodness. I would say avoid at all costs. I would say the cold smoothie trend.
Okay.
Like you do it once in a while for fun. Like if you really want to do it, you do it in the daytime when the sun is still out and your gastric juices are still. But otherwise, we're warm-blooded mammals. We are we're metabolic beings. Our body is always up to some, and you can't transform unless it's warm. Like you can't even charge your phone without electricity.
So no, like if I'm in Italy, like no gelato or anything like that.
No, don't do that. That'd be silly. If I were in Italy, I would eat gelato every single day. But you know what's an indulgence? You do it for fun, and you forgive your body, and you have fun with it. I mean, I will go to Tuscany this summer, and I'm going to eat gelato every single day. But I will do it in the daytime, and then later at some point in the day, I will get some warm water, maybe throw in a piece of lemon or ginger, whatever I find there, and whatever is easy. Right? I travel without any food, and I embrace where I go. So you want to do all of that, but you want to know what you're doing for fun and you want to know what you're doing for health. So for health trends, like if it's cold, like just look at all the ancient traditions that knew a thing or two about your body. Nobody had cold. And it makes sense complete because of the warm-bloodedness that we have. And this gastric juices, they have to deal with that coldness and then kind of work so hard to keep that temperature alive. So that's the one. The second trend I would say is apple cider vinegar. People have gotten crazy about apple cider vinegar. And because everything is being tested in laboratories. And yes, I myself talked about small amounts of fermented food, but apple cider vinegar, I actually, there was a time that I would ask people that if you're on apple cider vinegar, I'm not sure if I want to work with you because so much damage has been done. Because it ruins, it slurps up your mucosal lining. It is so hot. It's going to slurp your mucosal lining. And you want to eat small amounts of fermented foods like kimchi, sauerkraut, olives, pickles, that your ancestors ate. But you don't want to do so much apple cider vinegar. I would say these are the two big trends. And there's some issue with excessive protein consumption, especially if it's isolate proteins. But these two, I would say, are really big ones.
Anything away from food? For example, I sleep now with, there's lots of different devices for helping to sleep, and you've got white noise, and then you've got pills and everything. Is there something that you think is going to get debunked in the near future?
No, I actually think there's a lot of great advancements in the sleep science world. Okay. I actually do think that it's been great. Like I'm a big proponent of white noise because it gives our crazy flying all over nervous system that one steady stimulus, and it's very, very useful. And in fact, it's beautiful, right, Julian? Because even in Ayurveda, they talk about what are the properties. We talk about something called gunas required for sleep. They say cool and steady and heavy. And that's what a heavy blanket, a weighted blanket, a little bit of a cooler room, and then really like being that cozy, right? Because at that point, between 10 and 2, your body has internal metabolic repair and thermogenesis and all of that. I'm a nerd, so I'm not going to get into it. But I see actually great advancements in the sleep science world.
In terms of breath, I used to be a semi-professional opera singer. So for me, like breath is like one of the most important things, right? So, but what can someone do to like regulate their sympathetic nervous system with something as simple as breath?
So what can we do with breath, right? So that's a beautiful question. So the first thing that I want is, there are 2 ways that you can use your breath. And the most easy is understanding that every time you inhale, your body goes into what's called action mode, also sympathetic mode, fight or flight mode, because your body is now oxygenating, it's coming to life. And every time we exhale, your body goes into repair mode. It's the little night to your, every breath, one side is day, one side is night, one side is action, one side is repair. And what happens is that when we're on the go, we realize by the end of the day what happens, right, Julian? We'll finally sit down and we'll let out this big fat sigh. Right? Because your body is forcing that exhale. I also want you to think about why why humming feels good. Why ohms feel good. They're all exhales. They're all exhalation, right? So humming has become this tool now. Oh, it activates our parasympathetic. But I'm just like, hello, it's an exhalation. And your exhalation is parasympathetic. So you can do whatever. Like when you're feeling stressed. So this is what I do, right? When I feel like it's getting intense in the kitchen, or I feel like somebody's triggering me, or I'm feeling triggered. I cannot say somebody's triggering me, but I'm feeling triggered by something or somebody. I automatically go into a hum. I like start humming a song. And for some reason, for me, it's always a nursery rhyme. I don't even have such young children, but I'm just like, somehow it's a nursery rhyme, but I'll start humming something. And automatically your body starts to feel safe. So it's not only, you don't only hum when you're happy, you hum to make yourself happy as well. A big tool. But also if you want to do this more seriously, there's something called resonance breathing. And I recommend the breathing app, that's the name of the app, to just train yourself to breathe, exhale longer. And nasal, it's all through the nose, by the way. We're not supposed to be breathing through the mouth. That's just not what human beings are supposed to do. So you practice those longer exhales, practice them 5 times a day. Julian, I tell people, do it like it's prayer, like you do it 5 times a day. And you set an alarm 5 times a day. And you just few times in those, for a minute, you do a longer exhales through your nose. And train your body. Or sometimes you play that gong sound on the breathing app. My dear friend Eddie Stern has this app called the breathing app, and there's a sound of a gong which trains you to have a larger exhale. And they just play it in the background and while you're working. So you're conditioning your body to breathe, exhale longer. And it releases nitric oxide. I can go into the nerd science about it because I love it, but it's, there's so much science to it. But the other practice I want to say, which is probably one of my favorite practices, which is a little bit more systematic, is called alternate nostril breathing. But the idea is this, that how your right and left brain, the right side of your body is drastically different from the left side, right? I mean, imagine our hands are symmetrical, our fingers are symmetrical, but the liver, the hot organ, is on the right. And a heart is on the left, and the heart cannot be overheated. It has all this like nice gooey, the pericardium and all this filling around it to keep it a little bit cozier, slightly lower temperature. So the left side of the body is the moon side of the body. The right side of the body is the sun side of the body. And there is a practice called the alternate, the balance of the sun and moon is warm and moist. So there's a practice called the alternate nostril breathing, where you balance the sun and the moon side, the heat of the liver with the coldness of the lymphatic drainage and all of those fluids that exist in the body. And that alternate nostril breathing just like balances your nervous system, balances your hormones, balances your gut, and you can feel the difference instantly. I'm not even saying that, you're going to feel it tomorrow. You can feel your nervous system come back to warm and moist right away. But it's a practice that everybody can do at least 1 time a day. You want to look at it, find a good video. You want to do it 8 rounds. Start with 4 rounds, then you do 8 rounds. And then you want to use it as a tool in your toolkit as well. That let's say you're stressed, you're going for a meeting, just do it. Do it on the train, do it on the bus. I do it everywhere. I mean, sometimes I'll be sitting on a meeting and I'm like, I'm sorry, while you guys are talking, I'm going to do my alternate nostril breath. But those are the 2 places to start. I'd say you don't have to go to holotropic, that's different. Don't have to go to anything else. Just start here and train your body.
Do you mind if we just do 1 cycle of that? I'd just love to, for those watching especially.
Absolutely. So there are all these mudras, but you're not starting there. Like John is not starting there. You're going to ask John to keep it easy for himself, right? So you take your thumb and you block your right nostril. Block your right. And then you're going to inhale. So I'm not going to be able to actually do it with you, but I'll get everybody who's watching to do it. You inhale from the left. And hold. Hold both. And then you exhale from the right. Beautiful. Then you inhale from the right. Hold. Exhale from the left. Now, Juliet, this was the first time you did it, right? But I'm going to make you do it one more time. Or perhaps you probably have tried it, but a lot of people are doing it for the first time. Now, once you understand this, right, when you're learning something new, you're very focused so that, it makes it harder. But then I'm going to repeat what the instructions are and we'll do it again. You're inhaling from the left. You hold. Ideally, you want to hold for longer, but we're going to hold for a second or two. And then we're going to exhale from the right. Then you're going to inhale from the right. You're going to hold slightly and you're going to exhale from the left. And your body gets very quickly trained to do it. It sounds more complicated than it is, right? But your body gets trained. You inhale from this, I exhale from this, I inhale from the other one, I exhale. And then you want to close your eyes. And then as there are advancements in this and you automatically stumble upon those. Like you'll see when you're holding your breath, what happens. And when you exhale, what happens. You feel the warm, moist air exhaling. So you kind of develop a relationship with your breath. But let's just do one round, both cycles, and we won't keep it too long.
Sure.
But let's block the right nostril. Inhale from the left. Closing both. Exhaling from the right. Very lovingly inhaling from the right, very gently. You're blowing a balloon. Closing both. I made one hole in the balloon and you exhale from the left. And you can bring your hand back down. And you want to do this and you'll realize like your eyes relax and everything relaxes. I'm happy to share a link for my free pranayam tutorial on YouTube for the show notes if that's useful. But
For sure.
It's such a useful practice. The more you do it, the more you benefit out of it. And that's what I love about these Vedic sciences, that the marginal utility actually increases. It does not decrease. Your body can get there faster. It remembers this state. It's like you eat sugar 5 days, you're addicted to sugar. You drink 10 days in a row, you want to drink this 11th day. Similarly, your body knows this state. It knows how to come here. It wants to do it quicker. This is what it seeks.
God, what I'm hearing, what I'm feeling is that this is a coming home, right? It's like, how can we feel more connected with, and these are the words from Nilesh Sadhguru, who was one of my guests last week, but it's how can you reconnect with, everything that has gotten humanity, our tribes, our communities to this point, intuition, and just, as you said, the inner climate as well. In terms of the next step, the beyond tomorrow, if I were to go into your crystal ball, where would you see the Ayurvedic movement or Ayurvedic traditions in the next 3 to 5 years in major cities like New York and San Francisco and London?
Honestly, I would like how I genuinely feel as you answer this question is for people to firstly, not fully disconnect the term Ayurveda from it, but to understand that this is a science of life. Ayurveda, we don't say, hey, gravity is from the place Newton came from, right? We don't say that, hey, gravity is Indian or European or American. We just say gravity is gravity. So I would love for Ayurveda to be recognized as the science of life and also recognize that other cultures understood it. They may have had different names, but this is how human beings were meant to live. So I would like for that understanding to be had across. And because it's really what can save us, the science of life. You just have the literature preserved a little bit longer. Indians love to write and make their notes and textbooks. So we have it preserved for a long time. And that's why it's accessible to the world today. To understand how remarkable this is. But really, I think what I would like to see is for the world to be a little less flat, for countries, for us to really stay close to our existing ecosystems, work more through our five senses, everybody to shut down earlier during the day, to eat heavier lunches, lighter dinners, and to oil your body, really interact, like basically go back to the way that our ancestors lived. And there's so much promise in that. And I also honestly don't think it's very far-fetched for a large part of the world to go back there. And here in the US, this is the movement that I'm trying to create, is for us to go back to that way of living.
I had Jamie Maitland on the podcast a couple of weeks ago that talked about her 21-day reset, and your book has 21-day reset in it as well. So why is 3 weeks such a used kind of length of time for these resets? And what can myself or John or Emily expect to get from those 21 days? On day 1 and day 21, I should say.
Yeah, I think so. The beauty is that the day 1 actually starts after you've gone through part 1 and part 2 of the book. So I've had you sit with this wisdom for some time and make your subconscious connections. And I really invite for that to happen before you actually jump on to making the shifts. But then when you want to change those habits, and 21 days is the amount of time that it takes for new neurons to fire and wire, to actually for those new connections to be made, so that you've changed that behavior, just how, for most people, how brains work like that, right? So that's the reason why we're giving the 21 days for new neurons to fire and wire those connections so it becomes sustainable. But at the end of the 21 days, what I can expect is for you to look at the world completely differently, to have a completely different lens, for this to be a reprogram, not just a program. It does not end when the 21 day ends. Your life begins when the 21 day ends. It's like you've gone to the ophthalmologist and you've gotten glasses and you were like, I was seeing everything wrong so far. And to feel empowered with it, not upset about it. And for you to live with tremendous ease and know that changes will be made. Like, for example, Julian, if you were coming to New York in winter, you would just know how you had to pack a winter jacket. You wouldn't consult Google and say, how do you dress in winter, because you know it. Your body has experienced it. So I want the learning to be through experience. And I teach you how to have that experience through the book. And that's when it becomes wisdom. Information, experience, wisdom. And you'll have that journey. And I want that to bring tremendous ease to everybody who reads the book.
Are longevity and biohacking the same? And how does Ayurveda traditions actually come into the longevity field?
It's beautiful, right? Like those words sound similar, but they're actually quite the opposite, because longevity is about honoring your cycle and understanding how you can enhance it. And biohacking is hacking your biology, going against nature. So let's keep biohacking. So biohacking, Ayurvedic, very un-Ayurvedic, because Ayurveda is all about honoring the rhythms that exist out there. But longevity is a conversation that Ayurveda has texts written on longevity. And not so that you can elongate your life, but you can elongate your life in a way that it has purpose. You can elongate your transformation period. Women don't have to menopause so early. Men don't have to give up their physical wellness so early. You can actually elongate that period in a loving manner. And then you can also make use of the time, which is in your, post-menopause for women, for men over 60. You can actually use that period to find more purpose and go deeper. So you want to have a sweet life, right? And Ayurveda is all about that sweet, long life, so that you can use it to bring purpose. Now, that being said, there's just 2 factors, Julian, which I think that I want to talk about, is that one of the main principles of Vedic science is your number of breaths that each person comes with are predetermined. So how quickly do you use up your breaths? And now science is kind of there's an indirect correlation where they said, hey, the more stress. So you and I, normal people, we're having this nice conversation. Our breath is 12 to 20 breaths per minute. You're in stress, it could be 40 breaths per minute. Yogis like to bring their breath down to 4 breaths per minute. Slowing down your breath is slowing down your life. High breath, high stress, high burnout. So a lot of these practices are about slowing down your breath, doing while you're being, not just go. So that's one. And then the second is drying is dying, right? Autumn is drier than the summer. And that's why plants die. They don't live anymore. And we dry when we hit our, for women, perimenopausal, menopausal phase and the other side. And you see somebody who's really old, they're very shriveled and dry. So you don't want to start drying when you're in the peak of your youth, with overly depleted lifestyles, over like excess caffeine, excess alcohol, go, excessive exercise, over productivity. You'll dry out. So there are many other ways also to bring that moisture and fuel, not just through H2O. That's not how you bring moisture, but through your sleep, through your isolations, through your oil massages, through loving connections and conversations. But you want to be preserving your moisture and your nourishment in your body and not be depleted, because number of breaths are limited and drying is dying.
On that note, beforehand, you said that decay is this third path within Ayurveda. So for people in the longevity movement that are looking at therapeutics and ways to live longer and longer, and even some talking about immortality, what would you say to that?
I would say to that if you're doing it like a yogi, go for it. You're going to be more and more connected. You're going to have a positive impact on yourself and everybody around you. And you're going to use this life as a human being to undo something great, right? So like yogis wanted to extend their life to undo themselves, not to do more outside. Like on the other side of a reproductive phase for men and women both, it's the undoing that begins. The transformation is the doing aspect of it. So if you're doing that, go for it. Slow down your breath. Learn all of this. Just slow down your pace. Be more connected within. Your inner world is more real than your outer world in that place. And then using all those oil therapies on your body, on your hair, all of that can significantly have an impact on extending that longevity. And there's some herbs which are also moist herbs, rasayanis, which do the same, which can support.
And if you're not doing it as a yogi?
If you're not doing it as a yogi, it's going to feel like a struggle. You can still do these both things, but it's going to feel like a struggle because the doing will will make your breath shorter. And once your breath is shortened, there is a burnout, there's a stress that is in the body, and it's going to be harder. The journey is going to be harder. I feel like living each day in the fear of death is what you're not really living. So you want to embrace that so you can live fully every moment here, being present. And yet you can slow down and let that longevity happen for you.
Nidhi, thank you so much. I just want to do a little shout out to your book, which is now available on Amazon and a few other websites. Your Body Already Knows Intuitive Ayurveda.
Thank you so
much for your time.
Thank you, Julian.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time.